Very lucky to have Rich from Fozzy on the line. Rich, thanks for taking my call this morning.
Hey, Mal, thank you. It's great speaking with you. I'm sitting outside the venue in a friend of mine's pickup truck. Because Jericho is doing a podcast in the back of our tour bus, so I had to find refuge someplace else to do this interview with you, and I'm staring at a long line of people queued up to come see us play tonight, so I'm super excited.
How cool is that?
I know. They don't even see me in here, but if they did, they'd probably still ignore me.
You toured Australia 2013, December 2013, with Steel Panther and Buckcherry. What are your memories of that tour?
One of my favorite tours I've ever done, and partially it's just because those guys are such nice people. I mean, that's half of the joys of touring is sharing the stage with, people that you really have a good camaraderie with on and off the stage. And, had a lot of great meals together and had a lot of great laughs, and their road crew couldn't have been nicer people. And it just felt like one big rolling family. So those are always the ones that are the most fun because honestly, anytime that you're on stage, it's the best thing in the world. I mean, I'm playing guitar in front of folks who have taken some hard-earned cash out of their pocket to support us and come have a good time. And so the shows are always great. The thing that can make a tour amazing is when you're really sharing that touring experience with people that you also like. And the adverse is also true. If you're touring with bands who are just full of a bunch of jackasses, that's no fun. So that was an excellent tour, great crowds. Can't go on and on about how much fun we had. And I'm a big fan of playing in hot weather. And I remember while we were over, it was really nice and hot. Good sweaty gigs. I loved it.
Excellent. On a personal note here, who were your main guitar influences growing up, Rich?
Well, I mean, my first kind of band that was a rock band that I really resonated to was AC/DC. I just love the sound of the band. I love the power of these 5 individuals that together created this sound that was so infectious, and that no matter where you were when that song came on the radio, your head just started bobbing as an uncontrollable, reaction. And so I taught myself how to play guitar to Highway to Hell and Back in Black. And then I started listening to like High Voltage and those records, and just trying to learn how did Malcolm approach rhythm guitar? How did Angus approach lead guitar? And then from there, I was into Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and the Scorpions and Ozzy and Accept. So many of those kind of early 80s metal bands. Like I remember specifically hearing Screaming for Vengeance the first time and thinking the sounds from my turntable at that moment were things I've never heard before. The Hellion into Electric Eye, just into Riding on the Wind. I mean, it changed my life.
Yeah.
I as a young kind of misfit guy who I came from like a lot of young people these days, my parents were split up and my mom worked a lot. So I kind of raised myself a little bit. I was always just kind of riding my skateboard around and listening to music and music became kind of my best friend. It became something that I spent most of my childhood doing, which is learning to play guitar and listening to albums and reading magazines and, thinking about, I can't wait. And for 12 weeks away, Iron Maiden's coming. And you would count it down, 11 weeks and Iron Maiden will be here. And that's why for me, now that I've had this amazing blessing of being in a band and touring, I always try to make sure that I think about how excited it was for me when my favorite band came to town. So it doesn't matter what's going on in my life or how I feel or whatever's going on. I'm going to put every ounce of my energy and leave every drop of sweat available on the stage.
Good answer. Excellent answer. How'd you get the nickname The Duke?
There was a German rock magazine that when I was touring in the mid-'90s with Stuck Mojo, they did an album review of our album Rising. Yeah. And in the album, it said, in the review, it said, if Zakk Wylde is the king of metal, then certainly Rich Ward deserves to be called the Duke of Metal. And I thought, well, okay, that's the coolest thing I've ever read about myself. So now I'm keeping that name.
That's a good story. Right, now, Fozzies, Do You Want to Start a War came out in 2014. How did that album go?
It was great. I was, up until that point, I felt like we were still really working hard to capture the energy of our band in the studio, because it's a whole different process. You can spend all of this time making these albums, and you sometimes can get so inside your own head, and you're so worried about the right performance that you forget to capture the magic that fans get to see you deliver on stage. And so, and Do You Want to Start a War, I think, really sees us at that moment where we've been able to marry the energy of our live performance on a studio album with what I consider to be really good songs. Again, Fozzy is a band, and we all play different roles in the studio and in the songwriting and in that process. But we are truly a band. So, without the five guys, these albums would sound totally different, even if we replaced one person. The chemistry is so important to the sound of the band, and I'm just so lucky to be in a band with four super talented guys that I really respect.
Speaking to people like I do, I hear a lot of different stories about the recording process, and with modern technology, that can be done even on the other side of the world. Like one of the stories I heard last week. How is it for Fozzy? Are you all in the same room? Are you in different cities? Is it a process of writing with a couple of you and then the other guys come in? What's the Fozzy story?
We don't really have one formula, and part of that is because Jericho obviously still, during the process of writing this record, was still involved in wrestling, so he was busy on the road. So some of this stuff was written with myself and Johnny Andrews, who is the producer of the album. Mm-hmm. So we would go into the studio a couple of days a week and start to kick around ideas. Mm-hmm. But really, the magic of making albums is that you can come up with song ideas and melodies and lyrics, but it doesn't really start to become a song until the rest of the guys come in and start adding their bits and pieces. Kind of imagine it like a house, and you have a couple of guys that, put the blueprints together and they lay the foundation. But then all it is just a foundation. I mean, then the other guy's coming in and they're listening to your ideas, but they're building a home. They're putting the walls up. And so, yeah, there were times when we were in different cities sharing ideas via email. There were some times we'd get onto Skype and do some face-to-face chatting, but that's only when we couldn't be in the same room together. There was a lot of time where, we had guys in the same room working out parts, but I think that what happens, and I noticed this as I've gotten older, that the technology allows you to do things in a different way, but you need to try to temper that with the idea that there's nothing that can match the chemistry of human interaction. And those are things that we really got to, obviously, my motto is not can you, but should you. So can you use the technology? Yes, of course. But should you? And there are certain times where a phone call or, like I said, a video chat will work, and there's other times you need to be in a room together to work it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, the new album, Judas, coming out very shortly. That the album flows very well. How many songs did you record for this? How many did you have to knock out?
Well, we knocked out probably 10 or so songs along the way, but we abandoned them before they were completed songs. So the idea was, when we felt like the song had stalled a bit in the creative process, and we were quick to just say, let's not try to force this. It didn't seem natural. It didn't seem like this was going anywhere, even though there may have been some grains of brilliance. We decided to leave those ideas alone and maybe revisit them at a later date for another album. But there was only one other full song that didn't make the album, a song called Morphine Kiss, which was a really cool song, but it just didn't seem to match up well with the rest of the songs. And as you said, I mean, the flow of an album is so important. And so we just felt like these 11 were the ones.
Yeah, okay. Now, with the aforementioned modern technology, most albums sound good these days, but I found myself noticing and admiring the guitar sound on this album. Who gets the pat on the back for that?
Well, I mean, of course, it's going to go on yours truly because I played it and it's my amps. That's been. It's funny because, I've always been one of those guys who has always been a seeker of tone, because all of my favorite guitar players are always the ones that have just that sound that I connect with. When I listen to David Gilmour play guitar, there's something about the sound of his instrument and his hands that speaks to me. And the same way with Randy Rhoads or Gary Moore and Eddie Van Halen, Billy Gibbons. I mean, there's no mistaking when these guys play. On the first note, they just have a sound that is like a thumbprint. It's such an identifiable and unique sound to them. And so that's been something that I've spent the majority of my life kind of striving for, is finding the right type of amplifiers and the right types of guitars, not because my heroes played them, but because what works best for me, because ultimately, instruments are tools and they're there and they all do something a little different tonally, and the shapes of the neck are differently. And so it's a matter for each guitar player to try a million different guitars until you kind of find the one that's the fit for you. And I have 20 plus amplifiers and 40 something guitars in my house, and I've got a really brilliant home studio where I track all the guitars myself. And I set my house up that way because one of my favorite things in the world is recording guitars. I just love that process. And having all of these guitars in these big racks so that, hey, if I want to pick up a vintage Fender Telecaster, it's right there. If I want a vintage Gibson Flying V, it's right there. If I want to get a brand new Paul Reed Smith baritone guitar, it's right there. It's like being an artist and having multiple colors to go to, and depending on what mood and what atmosphere or how fierce and aggressive you use those tools that kind of will achieve the desired effects that you're wanting to put down. And then I have boatloads of interesting vintage pedals like fuzz pedals and choruses and wah pedals, and if you think about it, how important was Jimi Hendrix's sound to those little boxes at his feet, and just how he incorporated those with how he played. They just became another, tool for him. And I've always admired guys who could supplement their playing with these, really ingenious little boxes. Yeah.
Now, the new album, which I touched on before, Judas, comes out very shortly. What happens now for Fozzy? I mean, you're playing on, you're on tour at the moment, as you mentioned. Where to after this?
We are, this is the last night of this tour. And I say this tour, this leg of the tour. We go home for 6 days, and then we have our album release day. So the album comes out here in the States on October 13th, which is a week from today, or 5 days from now. And on the Saturday, the 14th, we're playing 3 shows in 3 different time zones in one day.
Wow, good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. So we chartered a private jet, and in the morning, Saturday morning, we play in Florida, and then we go to Texas, and then we go to Las Vegas. So we play 3 shows, 3 full headlining shows, and we just wanted to commemorate the launch of this album with something really ambitious and something I think will be very cool for the fans who get to attend it. But we're also going to film it for a documentary, so people can get some behind-the-scenes looks at whether it killed us or not.
Excellent. Rich from Fozzy, absolutely magnificent talking to you. Good luck with the new album, Judas, out very shortly. And thanks for talking to us today.
Yeah, it's my privilege, Mal. Thank you so much for the time, and thanks for giving me a few moments to talk about me and my gang of happy rock and roll warriors. And we're hoping that we'll be able to see you guys on your fine island here sometime in 2018.
Excellent. Thanks for talking to us, mate. You have a great day.
You do the same. Take care. Bye-bye.